When you add your CueCam elements to an existing performance, you improve the relevance of that footage, and you get to add your perspective to it. So for whatever audience that you're trying to engage, you're fine-tuning that material to them. So here's the setup. I have CueCam running here with its script and the screen that's on display now and the controls to watch audio levels and manage shares. Then I have Video Pencil here, which can be a control surface and a drawing surface. And then this is an iPad running HDMI into my Macintosh. Anything that supplies that feed from that device, we can now make that a main camera. Behind the scenes, I will be switching things. I'll go into demo mode. We'll see the main presentation, we'll be hearing it, but I'll be showing what I'm doing with CueCam. I am going to this presentation, which is Steve Jobs at the International Design Conference in Aspen, Colorado. And he did a magnificent performance. He was less than 30 years old, and it was quite a venue there. So I'm going to bring in Steve from 1983 off of the iPad, and all of this can be found at stevejobsarchive.com. Wonderful transcripts, more pictures, a great resource, but of course, doing a video about it probably helps people understand the value of that archive. And
Morning.
Get started and I'll go away.
Introductions are really funny. They paid me $60, so I wore a tie. How many of you are 36 years older than 36 years old? Yeah. You were born pre-computer. The computer's 36 years old. And there's something sort of, I think that there's going to be a little slice in the timeline of history as we look back. Pretty meaningful slice right there. A lot of you are products of the television generation. I'm pretty much a product of the television generation, but to some extent starting to be a product of the computer generation. And the kids growing up now are definitely products of the computer generation. And in their lifetimes, the computer will become the predominant medium of communication, just as the television took over from the radio, took over from even the book. Boy, I'll talk about anything you want to talk about today. I have about 15 or 20 minutes of stuff that I just wanted to cover really quickly. And then whatever you want to talk about, we can talk about. How's that? Yeah? How many of you own an Apple? Any? Or just any personal computer? Uh-oh. How many of you have used one or seen one? Anything like that? Good.
So before we get into it, let's make him the main camera. And by doing that, I'm going to move from my IVI to USB video. Now Steve's the main character in this, and let's get back to the presentation.
What is a computer? What is a computer? It's really simple. It's just a simple machine, but it's a new type of machine. The gears, the pistons have been replaced with electrons. How many of you have ever seen an electron? That's the problem with computers, is that you can't get your hands on the actual things that are moving around. You can't see them, and so they tend to be very intimidating because in a very small space there's billions of electrons running around, and we can't really get a hold on exactly what they look like. Computers are very adaptive. It's a very adaptive machine. We can move the electrons around differently to different places, depending upon the current state of affairs, the results of the last time we moved the electrons around. So if you were here last night and you heard about the brain and how it's very adaptive, a computer is in the same way very, very adaptive. Second thing about a computer, it's very new. It was invented 36 years ago in 1947. The world's first degree in computer science offered by a university, which was the University of California at Berkeley, and it was a master's degree, was offered in 1968, which means the oldest person that has a degree in computer science is 39 years old. And the average age of professionals at Apple is under 30. So it's a field that's dominated by fairly young people. Third thing about computers, they're really dumb. They're exceptionally simple, but they're really fast. The raw instructions that we have to feed these little microprocessors, even the raw instructions that we have to feed these giant Cray 1 supercomputers, are the most trivial of instructions. They're get some data from here, get a number from here, fetch a number, add two numbers together, test to see if it's bigger than 0, go put it over there. It's the most mundane thing you could ever imagine. But the key thing about it is that, let's say I could move 100 times faster than anyone in here. In the blink of your eye, I could run out there and I could grab a bouquet of fresh spring flowers or something, and I could run back in here and I could snap my fingers, and you'd all think I was a magician or something. And yet, I was basically doing a series of really simple instructions, moving, running out there, grabbing some flowers, running back, snapping my fingers, but I could just do them so fast that you would think that there was something magical going on. It's the exact same way with the computer. It can go grab these numbers and add them together and throw them over here at the rate of about 1 million instructions per second. And so we tend to think there's something magical going on, when in reality there's just a series of these simple instructions. Now, what we do is we take these very, very simple instructions, and we, by building a collection of these things, build a higher level instruction. So instead of saying turn right, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, extend hand, grab flowers, run back, I can say, could you go get some flowers? Could you pour a cup of coffee? And we have started in the last 20 years to deal with computers in higher and higher levels of abstraction. But ultimately, these levels of abstraction get translated down into these stupid instructions that run really fast. Let's look at the brief history of computers. Best way to understand it's probably an analogy. Take the electric motor. The electric motor was first invented in the late 1800s, and when it was first invented, it was only possible to build a very, very large one, which meant that it could only be cost justified for very large applications, and therefore electric motors did not proliferate very fast at all. But the next breakthrough was when somebody took one of these large electric motors and they ran a shaft through the middle of a factory, and through a series of belts and pulleys shared the horsepower of this one large electric motor on 15 or 20 medium-sized workstations, thereby allowing one electric motor to be cost justified on some medium-scale tasks. And electric motors proliferated even further then. But the real breakthrough was the invention of the fractional horsepower electric motor. We could then bring the horsepower directly to where it was needed and cost justify it on a totally individual application. And I think there's about 55 or so fractional horsepower motors now in every household. If we look at the development of computers, we see a real parallel. The first computer was called the ENIAC in 1947. It was developed particularly for ballistic military calculations. It was giant. Hardly anyone got a chance to use it. The next real breakthrough was in the 60s with the invention of what was called time sharing. And what we did was we took one of these very large computers and we shared it. Since it could execute so many instructions so quickly, we'd run some on Fred's job over here, and then we'd run some on Sally's job, and we'd run some on Don's job, and we'd run some on Susie's job, and we'd share this thing, and it was so fast that everyone would think they had the whole computer to themselves. Time sharing was what really started to proliferate computers in the 60s, and most of you, if you've used computer terminals connected with some umbilical cord to some large computer somewhere else, that's time sharing. That's what got computers on college campuses in large numbers. The reason Apple exists is because we stumbled on to fractional horsepower computing 5 years before anybody else. That's the reason we exist. We took these microprocessor chips, which is sort of a computer on a chip, and we surrounded it with all the other stuff you need to interact with a computer, and we made a computer that was about 13 pounds. And people would look at it and they'd say, well, where's the computer? This is just a terminal. And we'd say, no, that is the computer. And after about 5 minutes of repeating this, finally a light bulb would go on in their minds. And they'd decide if they didn't like it, they could throw it out the window or run over it with their car. But that this was the entire computer. That's why we exist, fractional horsepower computing. This fractional horsepower computing has created a revolution. It was invented in 1976, the first personal computer. This year, in 1983, the industry is going to ship over 3 million of the little buggers. 3 million. By 1986, we're going to ship more computers than automobiles in this country. And let me digress for a minute. One of the reasons I'm here is because I need your help. If you've looked at computers, they look like garbage. All the great product designers are off designing automobiles, or they're off designing buildings, but hardly any of them are designing computers. And if we take a look, we're going to sell those 3 million computers this year. We're going to sell those 10 million computers in '86, whether they look like a piece of shit or they look great. It doesn't really matter, because people are going to just suck this stuff up so fast that they're going to do it no matter what it looks like. And it doesn't cost any more money to make it look great. There are going to be these objects, this new object that's going to be in everyone's working environment, and is going to be in everyone's educational environment, and is going to be in everyone's home environment. And we have a shot at putting a great object there, or if we don't, we're going to put one more piece of junk object there.
I'm going to stop the performance for a second here and move forward to when he discusses the future. And he does it beautifully, talking about the need for jobs, for people to learn how to program and build software, but then also how kids are learning to play games. And we'll pick it up from there.
Our models, better and more sophisticated, but that is an interactive way of learning that none of us ever had when we were growing up. And again, thousands of individual experiences, but all based on that one set of underlying principles. When I was going to school, I had a few great teachers and a lot of mediocre teachers. And the thing that probably kept me out of jail was books, because I could go read what Aristotle wrote or what Plato wrote, and I didn't have to have an intermediary in the way. And a book was a phenomenal thing. It got right from the source to the destination without anything in the middle. The problem was, you can't ask Aristotle a question. And I think as we look towards the next 50 to 100 years, if we really can come up with these machines that can capture an underlying spirit or an underlying set of principles or an underlying way of looking at the world, then when the next Aristotle comes around, maybe if he carries around one of these machines with him his whole life, his or her whole life, and types in all this stuff, then maybe someday after the person's dead and gone, we can ask this machine, hey, what would Aristotle have said? What about this? And maybe we won't get the right answer, but maybe we will. And that's really exciting to me. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't know how much time we have. I think I'm about to get. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.